Well, now it's time to transition to our next presentation of the day titled Predicting Enrollment Trends Across Gateway Math Courses. Dr. Gabe Kerr will share with us how K-State is looking ahead to predict enrollment and schedule sections of Gateway Math courses. Gabe, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Jen. So I'll share screen here. All right, so I'm Gabe Kerr. I'm a professor at K-State in mathematics. I'm the director of undergraduate studies for the department, and I work on several of the pathways committees. So today I was going to share what we've been doing here on predicting enrollment as we move into math pathways. I want to emphasize that these are the actual predictions we have, or projections we have, are tentative and really K-State projections. And I'll talk a little bit about the why and the how, as different institutions, I'm sure, will have different results. All right, so let me jump in. So the why would we want to make these projections? Well, of course, there's the practical reason of budgeting and planning for the faculty or the resources that are needed to move over to pathways. There's also course development, by which I mean, for many institutions, including K-State, while we had contemporary mathematics on our course schedule, we didn't have it completely conform to the KCOG standards until this last year, and we've had to make some changes with that. And knowing how many students are going to be in that will, affect, of course, that as well, how many people we're putting on those courses. Elementary statistics is also a different kind of course at a lot of different institutions because college algebra is not required as a prereq. So that can change the nature of the course. And so again, knowing how many students may be moving into that type of a course will be helpful. As Whitney just went over, the co-requisite planning, well, at least for K-State, is a new thing, but many institutions have co-requisites and some don't. So again, being able to project how many students are going into this co-requisite courses is important. And as Jen mentioned at the end, something that came out of this meeting with faculty, and in particular those faculty that are running co-requisites for the first time, many of them have said an enrollment cap of 15. Again, this is one guideline, is a pretty good measure for those courses, just so there's enough attention to the students' needs. And of course, training instructors for these co-requisites takes some work, and planning the curriculum for them takes some work. And so knowing the number of students moving into those courses is useful. And then finally, I wanted to say one of the other motivations for this is to really potentially rethink some course structure. So contemporary mathematics at K-State was, we had usually one, maybe two courses per semester. This semester we're at 3, and I anticipate in the future it'll be more. So before it was an individual course taught by a faculty member, going forward we will be coordinating it so that there's sort of a unified lesson plan that the different instructors are following. And then if we see a large enough decrease in college algebra, we may want to reconsider whether we're doing a large lecture and recitation model or a small lecture. So having some of these numbers will help with planning in these directions. So that's the sort of overview of why, and I think there are many other reasons that I'm sure many of you have as well. But what is the method, or how do we go about doing these projections? It's pretty straightforward, really. What we did is we took 2 academic years, so fall and spring, of college algebra enrollment at K-State, and we downloaded the enrollment rosters the courses, along with each student's major. And then online right now, you can go to KBOR's site and get a hold of the pathway per major. And we sort each of the students by major into their pathway, and then just record the count of each pathway group. And so this is sort of a time reversal. We go back in time and imagine we had pathways, and how would the students have been, what other courses would they have potentially taken? And so that's the how. And our results are here for the last 2 years. So on the right, you see the total enrollment number. Of course, you'll see in the fall semesters, we have more students taking college algebra than the spring semesters. That's pretty typical. And then they sort of redistribute to be about around 60%, maybe 50 to 60% of the students that were taking college algebra would still be taking college algebra. And then a good number of the other students fall into the other pathways. So I'll break it down by percentage here. These are total numbers. Sometimes it's very useful to look at the total numbers, because if you're planning, of course, how many courses to run, you may want to be looking at this chart rather than the next one, which is by percentage. But maybe this gives a more uniform view of the percentage of students that would be redistributed to different courses. So some people may be looking at the undetermined portion here, and there are many students that come in. In fact, I think I saw some questions in the chat earlier about these students that are undeclared. They don't know what major they're in, or that may be in a pre-professional program, or don't have a non-degree seeking program, and so they're sorted into undetermined. So yeah. So this gives us a sort of bird's eye view of how many of the college algebra students may not be taking college algebra, and which other courses they may enroll in going forward. All right, so that is the sort of how and what, but there are several known issues that I want to discuss with this method, just so that I don't come off as thinking we have all the answers here. We certainly don't. So about 20 to 25% of the people in these rosters are double majors. So whether or not they would take contemporary math if they had a double major that required college algebra, is not certain at all. And that's a fairly large portion of students. So I think that may throw off some of these results, and we may want to do a more nuanced look at those students. As I mentioned a second ago, I think there's a big question to advising and to sort of the larger system, as to how to handle students that are coming in, they're undeclared, or they have an open option kind of situation, how we advise those students on which math pathway to take. I think Connie addressed some of that about trying to figure out their meta major and steer them in that direction based on their interests. But I think projections like this are difficult for those students. The other thing I want to emphasize is this is a good sort of method to project how students may not, that were enrolled in college algebra, how they may not be enrolled in college algebra in the future, and which courses they may enroll in as their pathway course. However, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have that many new students in statistics. And again, that's because prior to this year, our statistics courses required college algebra. So many of the students that were taking college algebra were taking it and then taking statistics because their majors required statistics. So we shouldn't necessarily see a very large jump in the enrollments in elementary statistics based on this projection. And of course, an issue here is that this is not projecting the co-requisite course enrollments. It's just projecting which pathway the students are going into. So for that last point, we have some preliminary data that I'll share, but it's very preliminary. So for projecting co-requisite enrollments, well, we would take these types of class rosters and we would have to really fill in several other fields, and in particular, the placement measures that are recently being decided and have been decided and voted on and, well, are working their way through, we'll talk about next month. We would need a field for each of those placement measures. And then you would count, of course, which students would place into the co-requisite enrollment and which wouldn't. So I don't have complete results altogether, but we did look over the contemporary math of the current semester and see about a very small portion, about 10 students being put into the co-requisite version of that. And again, I think Connie showed the slide earlier that the co-requisite threshold that is working its way through the system is lower than the college algebra threshold for placements. So we would see less students, I think, in that co-requisite course. But again, we're expecting the contemporary math enrollment to go up, so this is something to keep in mind. College algebra, so this is spring 24, taking the students that are sorted in to the college algebra pathway and looking at them, and then looking at their placement thresholds. And this is what we found in that small, very small sample, is that about 28% would fall into a co-requisite course for the college algebra. So there are several known issues here. Only a couple that I wrote down. One is that this does take a lot more time, and one of the reasons for that is because not all of the data is really readily available. You have to, for some of the placement measures, you have to look at high school transcripts at this point, and so that is something I think that will be useful to put some work into. And again, you'll notice that in these results, statistics is not really included. And again, that is because we have a college algebra prereq for statistics. So most of the students that are in statistics in our prior courses have taken college algebra. We could look at this fall semester as the first kind of group, but we have not quite gotten there. So I think that is all I wanted to share. Thanks for listening.
That was really great, Gabe, and we appreciate you sharing with us an example of how one institution is thinking about how the enrollment trends will be changing as we launch math pathways. We do have time if anyone has a question that they would like to ask Gabe, kind of pick his brain while we have him here as you're thinking about the way that you might want to predict enrollment trends at your own institution. And to be clear, KBOR is not requiring that you do this. This was something that Gabe had been working on during the summer, and we thought it was really great and wanted to share it with others because we know chairs and directors and deans are already beginning to think about this. So any questions for Gabe?
I saw one question that asked whether K-State is changing the course to not have the elementary statistics course to not have the prereq, and that has already occurred. Yes, we do not have a college algebra prereq this year and going forward.